I'm Grace, 32, and I thought the man I married was my forever, my safe place, the father who would hold my hand through every milestone. But on the day our daughter entered the world, he was with someone else. That betrayal didn't just break my heart, it exposed a lie so deep that even his own family turned their backs on him. Before I tell you what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe because what happened next didn't just expose him, it destroyed everything he built on lies. Derek and I had been married for 4 years when everything fell apart. We met at a tech company in Seattle where he was a team leader and I worked as a project manager. Our love story felt like something out of a movie. He was the kind of man who brought me coffee every morning, who would drive across town just to pick me up after work, even though I had my own car. He said he liked those extra 20 minutes together talking about our days, laughing at stupid jokes on the radio. Our wedding was small, held at a beautiful venue in the outskirts of Seattle with around 60 guests. Both our families came, and I remember how my mother Patricia cried during our vows. Derek's mother Linda hugged me afterward and whispered that she'd always wanted a daughter. His father Robert shook Derek's hand and said he was proud of the man he'd become. Everything felt perfect, like we were building something real and lasting. We moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Our life together was simple but happy. We had this routine where every Sunday morning Derek would make pancakes while I brewed coffee, and we'd sit on our tiny balcony watching the neighborhood wake up. He'd talk about wanting 3 kids someday, maybe a house with a backyard where we could host barbecues and watch our children play. I wanted that too. I wanted everything with him. When I found out I was pregnant in March of last year, it felt like all our dreams were coming true. I took the test on a Tuesday morning after feeling nauseous for 3 days straight. When those 2 pink lines appeared, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I called Derek at work, couldn't even wait until he got home. He left a meeting and drove straight back to our apartment. When he walked through the door, I just held up the test, and we both started crying. He picked me up and spun me around, then immediately put me down, worried he'd hurt the baby. The next 9 months should have been the happiest of our lives. Our first ultrasound appointment was magical. Derek held my hand so tight while the technician moved the wand across my belly. When we heard the heartbeat for the first time, this tiny rapid flutter, we both lost it. Derek's face was wet with tears and he kept saying, "That's our baby. That's really our baby." The technician printed out pictures and Derek carried them in his wallet, showing everyone at work. He threw himself into preparing for our daughter's arrival. He spent an entire weekend painting the nursery a soft yellow, saying it was a happy color that would make our baby smile. He assembled the crib himself, refusing my offers to help because he wanted to make sure it was perfect. My mother flew up from Texas to visit when I was 6 months along. She watched Derek fuss over me, making sure I had enough water, enough pillows, enough everything, and she told me I'd chosen well. Linda called every week to check in. She'd ask about my cravings, my symptoms, whether I was sleeping okay. She told me she'd never been so excited about anything in her life. This would be her first grandchild, and she'd already started knitting blankets and buying tiny outfits. Derek and I spent hours debating names. He wanted Emma for a girl, Lucas for a boy. I loved both. At night, we'd lie in bed with his hand on my belly, talking about what kind of parents we wanted to be, what values we'd teach our child, what kind of life we'd build together. But around my 7th month, something shifted. Derek started working late. At first, I didn't think much of it. He told me there was a big project at work, an important client that required extra attention. He'd come home at 9 or 10 at night, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open. I felt bad for him working so hard to provide for our growing family. I'd save him dinner heated up when he got home and listen while he talked about his stressful day. One evening when I was 30 weeks pregnant, I tried calling him around 7. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. By 9 o'clock, I was getting worried. I called a 3rd time and finally he answered. His voice sounded rushed, a little breathless. He said he'd been in a meeting with clients and couldn't step away. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me a reason to doubt him before. That night I sat alone at our dining table, eating the pasta I'd made for both of us. I rubbed my belly talking softly to our baby girl. I told her about her daddy, how hard he was working, how much he loved her already. My best friend Catherine had called earlier, asking if Derek was managing to get home at decent hours. I'd defended him, said he was being responsible, making sure we'd be financially stable. Catherine had said I was lucky to have such a dedicated husband. I'd agreed, feeling grateful even through my loneliness. But deep down in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, something felt off. The way Derek's phone had gone straight to voicemail for 2 hours. The way he'd sounded when he finally answered, like I'd interrupted something. The way he came home smelling different, a cologne I didn't recognize, fainter than his usual scent, but there nonetheless. I pushed those thoughts away. I was pregnant, hormonal, probably imagining things. Derek loved me. Derek loved our baby. Everything was fine. By the time I reached 38 weeks, my doctor, Dr. Harrison, told me the baby could come any day. Every morning I woke up wondering if this would be the day I'd meet my daughter. I'd packed my hospital bag weeks ago, checking and rechecking that I had everything. Clothes for me, clothes for the baby, toiletries, phone chargers, snacks. I'd read that labor could take hours and I wanted to be prepared. I asked Derek to make sure his car had enough gas and that he knew the fastest route to the hospital. He promised he'd keep his phone on him at all times, that he'd drop everything the moment I called. But lately, he'd been forgetting his phone more often. He'd leave it in his car overnight or on his desk at work. Each time I mentioned it, he'd apologize, say he'd been distracted with the project. I tried not to nag, but anxiety gnawed at me. What if I went into labor and couldn't reach him? My mother called from Texas, asking if she should fly up early. I told her to wait until after the baby was born. I didn't want her sitting around our small apartment for days or weeks waiting. Besides, Derek had promised he'd be there. He'd taken paternity leave, cleared his schedule. We'd be fine. On a Friday morning in late October, I woke up at 5 a.m. with a dull ache in my lower back. I lay there for a few minutes trying to decide if this was real or just another false alarm. I'd had Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks, but this felt different, deeper, more insistent. I reached over and shook Derek awake. He blinked at me in the darkness, his voice thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I think I'm having contractions," I whispered. He sat up suddenly, alert. "Are you sure? Could it be false labor?" "Maybe. I don't know." He glanced at the clock. "Let's time them. If they get closer together, we'll go to the hospital." But then he did something that confused me. He got out of bed, showered, and got dressed in his work clothes. When I asked why, he said he had an early meeting he couldn't miss, but he'd come home right after to check on me. He promised he'd keep his phone on loud. I watched him leave, feeling a knot of worry in my stomach that had nothing to do with contractions. By 9 a.m, the pain had intensified. These weren't practice contractions. These were real. I grabbed my phone and called Derek. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. Panic started to creep in. I called a 3rd time, then a 4th. Nothing. I thought about calling Catherine, but she was in Portland on a work trip. My mother was thousands of miles away. I was alone. The contractions were coming faster now, every 7 minutes, then every 5. I knew I needed to get to the hospital. I called a taxi, my hands shaking as I locked the apartment door behind me. The ride to the hospital was a blur. I sat in the back seat, breathing through contractions, trying not to cry. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, asked if I wanted him to call anyone. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. When we pulled up to the emergency entrance, I paid him and shuffled inside, one hand pressed to my lower back, the other clutching my hospital bag. A nurse named Amanda met me at the desk. She took one look at me and immediately got a wheelchair. "Where's your partner?" she asked gently. "On his way." I lied. She wheeled me to a delivery room, helped me change into a hospital gown, and hooked me up to monitors. The baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady. I stared at the screen, watching the peaks and valleys of my contractions, and tried calling Derek again. His phone was off. Completely off. Not even ringing. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, after 9 hours of labor, Emma was born. She came into the world screaming, her face red and furious, her tiny fists waving. The nurse placed her on my chest, and I felt a love so overwhelming it physically hurt. She was perfect. 7 pounds 3 ounces, a full head of dark hair, 10 tiny fingers, and 10 tiny toes. Nurse Amanda wiped tears from my eyes. She's beautiful. What's her name? Emma, I whispered, my voice breaking. That's lovely. Your husband is going to be so happy when he gets here. But he wasn't there. The most important moment of my life, and I was alone. I held Emma close, kissing her forehead, whispering that I loved her, that I'd always protect her. But inside, I felt hollow. Where was Derek? Why wasn't he answering his phone? What could possibly be more important than this? Derek finally showed up at 6 in the evening, 4 hours after Emma was born. He rushed into the room, his face flushed, his hair messy like he'd been running. He came to my bedside, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I'm so sorry. My phone died, and I left my charger in the car. I was in meetings all day, couldn't get away. I stared at him. You missed it. You missed everything. I know. I'm so sorry. He looked at Emma sleeping in the bassinet beside my bed. His eyes filled with tears. She's here. She's really here. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. Derek was wearing a different shirt than the one he'd left in that morning. It was a light blue button-down I'd never seen before, and there was a smell faint but unmistakable. Women's perfume. Not mine. Why did you change your shirt? I asked. He glanced down like he'd forgotten. Oh, I spilled coffee on myself at lunch. Had to borrow one from a coworker. A coworker. The explanation came too quickly, too smoothly. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I'd just given birth to our daughter. This was supposed to be a happy day. But doubt crept in like poison. Derek picked up Emma, carefully holding her like she might break. He smiled down at her, tears streaming down his face. Hi, baby girl. I'm your daddy. I'm sorry I wasn't here when you were born, but I'm here now. Emma stirred, making a small sound. Derek looked at me, his expression full of wonder. She's perfect. You did amazing. But when I looked into his eyes, he couldn't hold my gaze. He looked away, down at Emma, anywhere but at me. That's when I knew. Something had happened. Something he didn't want me to know about. That night I lay in my hospital bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. Derek sat in the chair beside me, scrolling through his phone. Every few minutes he'd smile at something on the screen, then quickly click it off. I asked him what he was looking at. He said coworkers were sending congratulations messages, but he angled the phone away so I couldn't see. Around midnight, Emma woke up crying. I started to get up, but pain shot through my body. Derek didn't move. He just kept looking at his phone. I had to ask him twice to hand me the baby before he finally put his phone down and helped. He passed Emma to me, then immediately picked his phone back up. I watched him as I fed our daughter. Watched the way his fingers moved across the screen. Watched the small smile that played at the corners of his mouth. Watched him delete a message without reading it to me, and I felt something crack inside my chest. 2 days later, we went home. Patricia had flown in to help, and she was waiting at our apartment with groceries and flowers. She hugged me carefully, then took Emma from my arms with the practiced ease of someone who'd raised 3 children. She cooed at her granddaughter, told her how beautiful she was, how loved she was going to be. But even my mother noticed something was off with Derek. That evening, while he was in the shower, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. Is everything okay with you two? Why do you ask? He seems distant, distracted. Is he stressed about being a new father? I wanted to tell her everything, about the missed calls, the mysterious shirt, the perfume, the way he couldn't look me in the eye. but I couldn't form the words. Instead, I said, "He's just tired from work." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. She just squeezed my hand and told me to let her know if I needed anything. Over the next week, Derek's behavior got worse. He started going to work again, even though he'd taken paternity leave. He'd leave early in the morning and come home late at night. When I asked why, he snapped at me, said he was working his tail off to support us, that I should be grateful instead of nagging him. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to me that way. One night I was up at 3 in the morning with Emma. She'd been crying for an hour, and I was so exhausted I could barely stand. Derek was asleep on the couch in the living room, his phone beside him on the cushion. As I walked past to get a bottle from the kitchen, his phone lit up with a notification. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The message preview said, "Miss you. Can't wait to see you again." It was from a number not saved in his contacts. I stood there frozen, Emma fussing in my arms. My whole body started shaking. I wanted to pick up that phone and read everything. I wanted to wake Derek up and demand answers, but I was terrified. Terrified of what I'd find. Terrified that my worst fears were true. Instead, I went back to the bedroom, fed Emma, and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling. I thought about that message over and over. Miss you. Who missed him? Can't wait to see you again. When had they seen each other before? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. And in that moment, lying alone in the dark, while my husband slept on the couch, I felt more lonely than I'd ever felt in my entire life. 1 week after we brought Emma home, my phone rang while I was changing her diaper. I didn't recognize the number, but it was local, so I answered. It was Dr. Harrison. Grace, hi. I wanted to check in and see how you and Emma are doing. We're good, thank you. She's eating well, sleeping in short bursts like they said she would. That's wonderful. And Derek? How is he handling fatherhood? I paused, unsure how to answer. He's been working a lot. There was a long silence. Then Dr. Harrison said something that made my blood run cold. Grace, I need to tell you something. I've been debating whether to say anything, but I think you have a right to know. My heart started pounding. What is it? On the day you gave birth, I tried calling Derek multiple times. You'd listed him as your emergency contact. When I couldn't reach him, I kept trying. He finally answered around 4 in the afternoon. 4 in the afternoon. 2 hours after Emma was born. Dr. Harrison continued, his voice careful. He told me he was at a hotel downtown handling a personal matter. I asked him to come to the hospital immediately. He said he would, but he didn't arrive until 2 hours later. Grace, he specifically asked me not to mention the location to you. But the more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt. I think you deserve to know where he was. A hotel. Downtown. While I was giving birth to his daughter. A personal matter. Thank you for telling me, I managed to say, though my voice didn't sound like my own. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to call. I hung up and sat down on the floor, still holding the phone. Emma lay on her changing table, kicking her little legs, oblivious to the fact that her world was falling apart. A hotel. What personal matter would take him to a hotel on the day his child was being born? But I already knew. Deep down, I'd known for weeks. The late nights, the perfume, the messages, the way he couldn't look me in the eye. He was cheating on me. And not just cheating. He'd chosen to be with her on the day I gave birth. He'd chosen her over witnessing his daughter's first breath. I picked up Emma and held her close, my whole body shaking. She made a small sound and I realized I was crying. Tears were falling onto her little face. I wiped them away quickly, then wiped my own. Emma didn't deserve to see her mother fall apart. Emma deserved better. We both deserved better. That evening when Derek came home at 9 o'clock, I was waiting in the living room. I'd put Emma to bed early. The apartment was dark except for one lamp in the corner. Derek walked in, saw me sitting there, and froze. We need to talk, I said. He set his briefcase down slowly. About what? Sit down. He sat on the chair across from me, not on the couch where he usually sat. Like he already knew this was going to be bad. Like he wanted distance between us. I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 6 years, this man I'd married, this man I'd trusted with my whole heart. And I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Where were you on the day Emma was born? He blinked. At work. You know that. Don't lie to me anymore. Dr. Harrison called. He told me he reached you at a hotel downtown at 4 in the afternoon. So I'll ask you again. Where were you? Derek's face went pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I can explain. Then explain. There was a client meeting at the hotel. It ran long. I couldn't just leave. You're lying. Who is she? The question hung in the air between us. For a long moment, Derek said nothing. Then his shoulders slumped, and I knew. I knew before he said a word. Her name is Fiona, he whispered. Fiona. The name sounded foreign sharp. Who is Fiona? A coworker. It just happened, Grace. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. How long? Does it matter? How long, Derek? He looked at the floor. 6 months. 6 months. My entire third trimester. While I was growing our child, he was with someone else. While I was preparing our home, our nursery, our life, he was building something else with another woman. You were with her the day I gave birth. I'm sorry. I know how it sounds. You know how it sounds. My voice was rising, breaking. I gave birth to your daughter alone. I called you 30 times. I needed you, and you were with her. It was supposed to just be for a few hours. I was going to come to the hospital after, but then she got upset, and I couldn't just leave her crying. But you could leave me. You could leave your wife giving birth. I made a mistake. I stood up, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might fall. Get out. Grace, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You chose her over your daughter's birth. You chose her over me, over Emma, over our family. Get out of my house. This is my house, too. Get out. Derek stood reaching for me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. Grace, I love you. I love Emma. This was a mistake. I'll end it with Fiona. I'll do anything. You should have thought about that before you spent our daughter's birthday with your mistress. Now get out before I call the police. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his keys and left. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there in the silence. Then I walked to Emma's room. She was sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling, completely unaware that her father had just destroyed everything. I picked her up carefully, held her close, and whispered, I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry I chose the wrong man to be your father, but I promise you I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel the pain I'm feeling right now. I promise you'll know what real love looks like, what real loyalty looks like. I promise. And as I held my daughter in the dark, I felt something shift inside me. The love I'd had for Derek didn't disappear. It transformed into something harder, colder. Determination. I would not let this break me. I would not let my daughter grow up thinking this was normal, that this was what love looked like. I would fight, and I would win. The next morning, I didn't cry. I'd cried enough. Instead, I made a plan. While Emma slept, I opened my laptop and searched for divorce lawyers in Seattle. I found one with excellent reviews, a woman named Sarah Bennett, who specialized in cases involving infidelity. I called her office and made an appointment for the following week. Then I started gathering evidence. I logged into our shared bank account and began going through statements from the past 6 months. What I found made me sick. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. Charges at jewelry stores. A charge for $250 at a boutique hotel. $300 at another. Derek had been spending our money, the money we'd saved for Emma's future, on his affair. I took screenshots of everything. Every restaurant charge, every hotel stay, every suspicious transaction. I saved them all to a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. Then I went through his credit card statements. More of the same. Flowers delivered to an address I didn't recognize. Charges at a wine bar we'd never visited together. A charge for $600 at a spa. My hands were shaking, but I didn't stop. I needed all of this. I needed proof of what he'd done, proof that would hold up in court, proof that would get me full custody of Emma. Catherine called around noon. I told her everything. She was silent for a long moment, then she said, "I'm coming back to Seattle, today. I'll be there by tonight." "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. You're my best friend, and that son of a gun just made the biggest mistake of his life. You're not going through this alone." True to her word, Catherine showed up at my door at 8 that evening with takeout food, a bottle of wine for herself, and a fierce determination to help me through this. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. That's when I finally let myself break down. Not for long, just long enough to let some of the pain out. Then I wiped my eyes and got back to work. Over the next few days, Derek tried calling me repeatedly. I didn't answer. He sent texts begging to talk to explain to fix things. I didn't respond. He showed up at the apartment twice. I didn't open the door. On the third day, I sent him a single text. "My lawyer will be in touch." When I met with Sarah Bennett the following week, I brought everything. The bank statements, the credit card charges, the timeline of his affair, Dr. Harrison's phone records showing all the calls he'd made trying to reach Derek on Emma's birthday. Sarah sat across from me reviewing everything with a practiced eye. Finally, she looked up. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen. With this evidence, we can argue for full custody, substantial child support, and possibly even a portion of his retirement accounts." "I don't want his money," I said. "I just want my daughter." "You're entitled to support for Emma. She didn't ask for any of this." She was right. This wasn't about punishing Derek. This was about protecting Emma, making sure she had everything she needed to thrive. 2 weeks later, Derek called asking to meet. I agreed, but only in a public place. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the same one where he'd proposed to me 4 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was waiting at a corner table when I arrived, holding a bouquet of roses, my favorite kind, red with white tips. He stood when he saw me, his face hopeful. I sat down across from him and slid a manila envelope across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." He did. Inside were divorce papers and printed copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. His face went white as he flipped through the pages. Bank statements with circles around charges at hotels and restaurants, screenshots of receipts, a printout of Dr. Harrison's call log. "Grace, please. We can work through this." "No, we can't. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I'll end things with Fiona. I'll go to counseling. Anything you want." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You spent the day our daughter was born in a hotel with another woman. While I was in labor, scared and alone, you were with her. You chose her comfort over witnessing Emma's first breath. There is no coming back from that, Derek. There's no counseling that fixes that. No apology that erases it. I made a mistake. No, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is being late to dinner. What you did was a choice. You chose her, repeatedly, for 6 months. And the worst part is, you could have chosen us. Any moment of any day for 6 months you could have stopped. But you didn't. So now I'm choosing. I'm choosing Emma. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing a life without you." I stood up. Derek reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Sign the papers, Derek. Fight me, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. My family will never believe you. Then I'll show them the same evidence I showed my lawyer. Your choice." I walked out of that coffee shop with my head high, leaving Derek sitting alone with a bouquet of roses and the ruins of what he'd destroyed. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. That evening I called Linda, Derek's mother. My hands were shaking as I dialed, but I knew what I had to do. She answered on the second ring. "Grace, sweetheart, How are you? How's Emma? Linda, I need to tell you something. It's about Derek. I heard her intake of breath. What did he do? I told her everything. About the affair, about Fiona, about the hotel on Emma's birthday. Linda was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Linda, are you there? I'm here. Her voice was thick with tears. I can't believe this. My son. My own son. I'm filing for divorce. I thought you should know. Oh, Grace. I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. Emma doesn't deserve this. She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. Can I send you the evidence? I want you to see it yourself so you know I'm not making this up. Yes, please send it. I emailed her everything. An hour later, she called back. She was no longer crying. She was angry. I raised him better than this. His father and I taught him about honor, about commitment, about being a man of his word. And this is what he does. This is how he treats his wife, the mother of his child. I know this is hard for you. Hard for me, Grace? This is devastating for me. But not as devastating as what he did to you. You and Emma are my family. Derek has disappointed us all. I want you to know that Robert and I support you completely. Whatever you need, we're here. Thank you, Linda. That means more than you know. I'm cutting him off financially. His father and I have been helping him with his car payment and part of your rent. Not anymore. He wants to spend our money on that woman he can figure out how to pay his own bills. Over the next few days, Linda told Robert everything. Robert called Derek and told him he was no longer welcome at family gatherings until he made things right with me. Derek tried to explain, to minimize, to make excuses. Robert hung up on him. But the real blow came when people at Derek's company found out. Catherine had connections there, and while I never asked her, to word spread. Co-workers who'd respected Derek now saw him differently. His boss called him in for a meeting. While infidelity wasn't technically a fireable offense, his judgment was questioned. How could they trust someone in a leadership position who'd made such catastrophically poor decisions in his personal life? Derek was demoted. No longer a team leader. Just a regular employee. His salary cut by 30%. And Fiona. She was let go entirely. The company didn't want the drama, the gossip, the distraction. They made it clear her termination was due to creating a hostile work environment. But everyone knew the real reason. Derek's world was crumbling. His family had turned on him. His career was damaged. His wife was divorcing him. And Fiona, the woman he'd sacrificed everything for, wanted nothing to do with him now that he couldn't provide the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. I didn't feel joy at his downfall. I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant. I just felt tired and free. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without a weight on my chest. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. I got full custody of Emma, with Derek having supervised visitation rights every other weekend, which he rarely used. He was ordered to pay $3,000 a month in child support. The judge had looked at the evidence, listened to Dr. Harrison's testimony about the phone calls, reviewed the bank statements, and made her decision quickly. My mother had stayed for 3 months, helping me adjust to life as a single parent. She'd been my rock, watching Emma when I needed to meet with lawyers or just needed an hour to myself. When she finally flew back to Texas, I cried. But they were grateful tears. I could do this. I was doing this. Catherine helped me find a new apartment, smaller than the one Derek and I had shared, but cozier somehow. It was in a neighborhood with good schools, a park nearby, and neighbors who smiled and said hello. I decorated Emma's room myself, painting it a soft lavender instead of the yellow Derek had chosen. I hung pictures of my family, of Catherine, of Emma's smiling face. No pictures of Derek. This was our home now, mine and Emma's, and it felt right. I went back to work part-time. My company had been incredibly understanding, allowing me to work from home most days. I'd bring Emma to the office once a week for meetings, and my coworkers would take turns holding her, making faces at her, telling me how beautiful she was. My boss, a woman named Carol, who'd gone through her own difficult divorce years earlier, made sure I had the flexibility I needed. Emma was thriving. At 6 months old, she was rolling over, sitting up, laughing at everything. She had Derek's dark hair, but my green eyes. When she smiled, it was like sunshine breaking through clouds. She was my entire world, and every day, I fell more in love with her. Derek had moved to Portland, unable to handle the shame of staying in Seattle where everyone knew what he'd done. Linda told me he was working at a smaller company now, making less money, struggling to keep up with child support payments. She'd tried to maintain a relationship with him, but even she admitted it was strained. Every time she looked at him, she saw the son who'd betrayed his family. Fiona had apparently moved on quickly, dating someone new within weeks of losing her job. Derek had called me once drunk, crying about how she'd used him, how she'd never really loved him. I'd listened for about 30 seconds before hanging up. His pain wasn't my responsibility anymore. One evening when Emma was 9 months old, I sat in our living room watching her play with blocks on the floor. She was babbling, making sounds that almost resembled words, so proud of herself. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the loneliness of giving birth alone, the pain of discovering the affair, the strength it had taken to leave. And I realized something. I wasn't the same person I'd been a year ago. That Grace had been softer, more trusting, more willing to overlook red flags, because she wanted so badly to believe in love. This Grace was harder in some ways, but also stronger. This Grace knew her worth. This Grace wouldn't accept less than she deserved. Catherine came over that night with Thai food and stories from her latest work trip. We sat on the floor with Emma between us, eating pad thai straight from the containers, laughing at Catherine's impression of a difficult client. This was my family now. Catherine, my mother, Linda, and Robert, who still called every week, and most importantly, Emma. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked suddenly. "Leaving him, sometimes I see divorced people who seem to regret it years later, even when they had good reasons." I looked at Emma, who was trying to grab Catherine's noodles. "Not for a second. Yeah, it would have been easier to stay. To pretend everything was fine. To give Emma a 2-parent household, even if it was built on lies. But what would that have taught her? That women should accept betrayal, that we should stay with people who hurt us, that we're not strong enough to stand on our own. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She saved me in a way, gave me a reason to be strong when I wanted to fall apart." Later that night, after Catherine left and Emma was asleep, I stood in the doorway of her room watching her chest rise and fall. She slept with her arms above her head, her little fists curled, completely peaceful. I thought about the day she was born, how scared and alone I'd felt. How I'd wished Derek was there to hold my hand to tell me I could do it. But I'd done it without him. I'd brought her into the world by myself. I'd been strong enough then, and I was strong enough now. Stronger even. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo album, scrolling back to pictures from a year ago. Derek and me at a restaurant smiling. Derek painting the nursery. Derek and me at our last ultrasound appointment. We looked happy. We looked like a couple who had it all figured out. But looks can be deceiving. Behind those smiles were his lies, his secret life, his betrayal. And I was grateful in a strange way that it had all come to light. Because I'd rather raise Emma alone with honesty than raise her in a home built on lies, no matter how pretty those lies looked from the outside. I deleted the photos, every single one with Derek in them. Then I took a new picture of Emma, sleeping, her face peaceful and perfect, and set it as my lock screen. This was my life now. My beautiful, honest, hard-won life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. A year after Emma's birth, I found myself in a place I never expected to be. Happy. Truly, genuinely happy. Not in spite of what had happened, but because of how I'd handled it. I'd been tested in the worst possible way, and I'd come out stronger. Emma was walking now, stumbling around our apartment with the confidence of someone who owned the world. She said, "Mama" and "Nana" for my mother, "Cat" for Catherine. She didn't say "Dada." Derek came to visit once every few months, court-ordered supervised visits at a neutral location. Emma didn't recognize him. She'd cry when he tried to hold her, reaching for me instead. It broke my heart for her, but I wouldn't force her to bond with someone who'd already shown he couldn't be trusted. Linda visited often, flying up from Arizona where she and Robert had retired. She'd stay for a week at a time, helping with Emma cooking meals, giving me time to myself. She apologized constantly for Derek, as if his actions were somehow her fault. I'd tell her they weren't, that she'd raised him right, that he'd made his own choices. "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently," she said one afternoon while we watched Emma play in the park. "What I could have taught him that would have made him a better man." Linda, you can't control another person's choices, even your own child's. You gave him a good foundation. He chose to build something rotten on top of it. She squeezed my hand. "You're remarkable, you know that, the way you've handled all of this with such grace and strength. Emma is lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her." And I meant it. Emma had become my purpose, my reason for waking up every morning with determination instead of despair. Every milestone she hit, I celebrated twice as hard. Every smile she gave me felt like a victory. She would never remember the day she was born, the day her father chose another woman over her arrival. She would only know the love I gave her every single day after. I joined a support group for single mothers. We met every Thursday evening at a community center. There were 8 of us, all with different stories, but the same underlying theme: we were doing it alone and we were doing it well. Some were divorced like me. Others had never married. One woman's husband had passed away suddenly. But we all understood each other in a way others couldn't. Through that group, I learned that my story wasn't unique. Betrayal happened every day. Partners chose affairs over families. But what mattered wasn't the betrayal itself. It was what we did after. Did we crumble? Or did we rebuild? I chose to rebuild. I went to therapy once a week, working through the trauma of that day, the feelings of abandonment, the fear that I wasn't enough. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Rivera, helped me understand that Derek's actions were never about my inadequacy. They were about his own emptiness, his own inability to be present, his own cowardice. "You're not broken," she told me during one session. "You're healing. And healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll cry over a song on the radio. Both are okay." She was right. Some days I was fine. Other days, I'd see a couple walking hand in hand with a baby stroller, and I'd feel a pang of grief for what I'd lost. But those days became fewer and farther between. And eventually I stopped grieving what I'd lost and started celebrating what I'd gained. I gained clarity. I gained strength. I gained the knowledge that I could survive anything. I gained a daughter who would grow up knowing that women don't need anyone to complete them, that we're already whole on our own. One Sunday afternoon, I took Emma to the aquarium. She pressed her tiny hands against the glass, mesmerized by the fish. An older couple stopped beside us, smiling at Emma. "How old is she?" the woman asked. 13 months, I said proudly. "She's beautiful. You and your husband must be so proud." I used to correct people when they assumed I had a husband. Used to explain, to justify, to tell the whole story. But that day, I just smiled and said, "Thank you." Because it didn't matter anymore. Derek's absence didn't define us. His betrayal didn't define me. I was Grace, 33 years old, a mother, a project manager, a friend, a daughter. I was complete all on my own. That evening I sat at my desk and did something I'd been thinking about for months. I opened a new document on my computer and started writing. Not for publication, not for anyone else. Just for Emma. I wanted her to know the truth someday when she was old enough to understand. I wanted her to know that the day she was born was both the worst and best day of my life. The worst because I'd learned the man I loved had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. The best because I'd brought her into the world and she'd given me a reason to be brave. I wrote about the phone calls from Dr. Harrison, about Derek's confession about the divorce, but I also wrote about the strength I'd found, about the support from family and friends, about the joy Emma brought me every single day. I wrote about how betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but how I'd chosen to let it transform me instead. When I finished, I saved the document in a folder I'd give to Emma on her 18th birthday. By then, she'd be old enough to understand complex emotions, old enough to see her mother not as perfect, but as human. Someone who'd been hurt, but had chosen to heal. Someone who'd been knocked down, but had gotten back up. I thought about Derek, sometimes wondered how he was doing in Portland. Linda said he'd started dating someone new, a woman who didn't know about his past. I hoped he'd learned from his mistakes. I hoped he'd become a better man. Not for me, but for whoever he was with now. And selfishly, I hoped he regretted what he'd lost. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I wanted him to understand the weight of his choices. But mostly I didn't think about him at all. He was a chapter in my life that had closed. A painful chapter, but a finite one. My story continued without him, and it was a better story than it ever would have been with him in it. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry, if I hate Derek for what he did. The answer is complicated. Yes, I was angry. For months I burned with it. I'd lie awake at night imagining all the things I wished I'd said, all the ways I wished I'd hurt him, the way he'd hurt me. But anger is exhausting. It takes up so much space in your heart that there's no room for anything else. And I had Emma to think about. Emma, who deserved a mother who was present, who was joyful, who wasn't consumed by bitterness. So I made a choice to let go of the anger. Not all at once. Gradually, like loosening a fist I'd been clenching for too long. Do I hate him? No. Hate requires energy, attention, care. Derek doesn't deserve any of those things from me anymore. He's a stranger now, someone I used to know. When I think about him, which is rare, I feel nothing. Not love, not hate, not even indifference. Just a blank space where he used to be. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was mourning the life I'd thought we'd have. The house with the backyard, the 3 kids, the family barbecues and school plays, and decades of memories built together. I had to grieve those dreams, accept that they were never going to happen, and then figure out what new dreams to build. My new dreams were simpler, but somehow more fulfilling. I dreamed of raising Emma to be confident and kind. I dreamed of building a career I was proud of. I dreamed of surrounding myself with people who showed up, who kept their promises, who chose me the way I chose them. And slowly, I was making those dreams real. Emma turned 2 on an October afternoon, very different from the one she'd been born on. This time I wasn't alone. Catherine came bringing presents wrapped in glittery paper. My mother flew in from Texas. Linda and Robert drove up from Arizona. We had a small party in our apartment with balloons and a cake shaped like a butterfly because Emma was obsessed with butterflies. As I watched Emma blow out her 2 candles with help from her grandmother, I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. This was family. Not the one I'd planned, but the one I'd found. The one that had shown up. The one that stayed. Later, after everyone had left and Emma was asleep, I stood in the quiet of our apartment and reflected on the past 2 years. 2 years ago, I'd been married to someone I thought I knew, pregnant with dreams of our future. Now I was divorced, raising my daughter alone, building a life I'd never imagined. And yet, I wouldn't go back. Not to the marriage, not to the false security of a partnership built on lies. Because this life, hard as it was honest. Every moment of happiness was real. Every accomplishment was mine. Every decision was made with intention, not compromise. I thought about all the single mothers I'd met through my support group. Women who'd left abusive relationships, women who'd been widowed, women who'd chosen single parenthood from the start. We were all warriors in our own right, fighting battles most people never saw. And we were raising the next generation of humans, teaching them by example what strength looked like, what resilience looked like, what real love looked like. People often asked me what I'd learned from everything that happened. If I had to distill it into one lesson, it would be this: you are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to do after. Derek chose to have an affair. He chose to miss Emma's birth. He chose to lie, to betray, to prioritize his own selfish desires over his family. Those were his choices, and they defined him. But I chose to leave. I chose to fight for full custody. I chose to rebuild my life. I chose to forgive not for him, but for myself. I chose to wake up every morning and be the mother Emma deserved. Those were my choices, and they defined me. I learned that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. Yes, it changes you. It makes you more cautious, less naive, harder in some ways, but it can also make you stronger. It can teach you what you're capable of surviving. It can show you who your real allies are. It can force you to discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. I learned that you don't need a partner to be a whole person. Society tells us we're incomplete without romantic love, that we need someone to complete us. But that's nonsense. I was complete before Derek. I was complete during our marriage. And I'm complete now without him. Emma and I are a complete family, just the two of us. I learned that family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up. It's Catherine who dropped everything to be by my side. It's my mother who flew across the country to help. It's Linda and Robert who chose me over their own son because they knew I was right. It's my support group, women I'd never met before, but who became sisters in struggle. I learned that children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Emma didn't need two parents. She needed one present, loving, dedicated parent. And that's what she had. She was happy, healthy, thriving. She didn't feel the absence of something she'd never really had. Most importantly, I learned that pain is temporary, but the person you become through pain lasts forever. The pain of Derek's betrayal has faded. I barely think about it anymore. But the strength I gained from surviving it, that's mine forever. The confidence, the self-reliance, the bone-deep knowledge that I can handle anything life throws at me, that's not going anywhere. I walked to Emma's room and stood in the doorway watching her sleep like I did most nights. She was getting so big, growing so fast. Soon she'd be starting preschool, then elementary school, then middle school, high school, college. I wouldn't be there for every moment, but I'd be there for the ones that mattered. And when she was old enough, I'd tell her this story. Not to turn her against her father, but to show her what I hoped she'd never need, but should always know that she could survive anything. I'd tell her that the day she was born, her father made a choice that hurt me deeply. But I made a choice too. I chose her. I chose us. I chose to build a life worth living, a life filled with honesty and love and real connection. And that choice made all the difference. So if you're going through something similar, if you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you're wondering whether you can survive this, let me tell you, you can. You're stronger than you know. The pain you feel right now won't last forever, but the person you become through it will. You deserve honesty. You deserve loyalty. You deserve someone who chooses you every single day without hesitation. And if the person you're with can't give you that, then you deserve the courage to walk away. Because sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes starting over is the biggest victory. And sometimes the worst betrayal leads you to the best version of yourself. That's what happened to me. Derek's betrayal shattered the life I'd built, but from those pieces I created something better. Something honest and strong and mine. He gave me pain, but I turned it into power. He showed me betrayal, but I found strength. He broke my heart, but I used the pieces to build armor. And now, 2 years later, standing in my daughter's doorway in our little apartment with its lavender walls and family photos, I can honestly say I'm grateful. Not for what he did, but for what it forced me to become. A mother, a fighter, a survivor, a woman who knows her worth and won't settle for less. That's the real gift hidden in the pain. The discovery that you're so much more than you ever knew, that you can do hard things, that you can stand on your own, that you're complete just as you are, needing no one to define you or validate you or complete you. Emma stirred in her sleep, her little hand clutching her stuffed butterfly. I smiled, pulled her door closed, and went to bed. Tomorrow was a new day, and like every day since I'd left Derek, it was mine to shape however I chose. I have a question for everyone watching. Have you ever had to choose between staying in a relationship for comfort or leaving for your own self-worth? How did you make that decision? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings you strength if you need it, or reminds you that you already have strength even if you can't see it yet. Take care of yourselves. You're worth fighting for.